Welcome to the Mom and podcast. We're your hosts, Suzanne Kearns
and Missy Stevens. We want to help you through everything that happens in the ellipses, from your professional life to your emotional health.
You're a mom and so much more. Let's figure out what comes next together.
Welcome to the Mom and podcast. I'm Missy Stevens, mom and writer, foster child advocate, and this week, Booster Club budgeter.
You really do it all. Is that for the swimming too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm Suzanne Kearns, mom and writer, LGBTQ and sex ed advocate, and today co-hosting an online 2 Million Texans training. It's from Texas Blue Action, and we'll put a link in the show notes for future trainings. So yes, if you're trying to turn Texas blue, look me up. And this week we are so excited to be chatting with Dmitria Burby. Dmitria is a best-selling author, transformational yoga therapist, and consciousness coach that helps people reconnect with themselves. She sits at the intersection of the latest in neuroscience, biochemistry, and ancient wisdom of yoga. There's going to be some brain stuff, Missy. Are you excited?
Oh, for sure. I'm excited.
She leverages these specific practices and knowledge to support people's transformation from a life of effort to one of ease. She is passionate about people rediscovering the vibrancy of life that comes when you are able to feel whole and connected in your life. Dmitria reconnects people to the joy, happiness, and ease of a well-lived life. Doesn't that sound
I
nice?
love every bit of that. Yes.
You might just read that every morning. It almost just calms you just reading it. Like,
it is calming.
Well, welcome. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I am a longtime listener and now a guest. So I'm thrilled to be joining you in this way.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic. I know Suzanne knows you. Do you want to share how y'all know each other?
Okay. So, I know you through my husband because you worked together. God, was it over a decade ago?
Oh, yes. Yes. We were like babies back then.
And we literally had babies together, like within a couple months of each other.
Yes.
And then we were just saying we ran a half marathon like a few months after that. But we did not train together.
Crazy.
Dmitria lived in Portland and we lived in Seattle. And
Oh,
so
okay.
we kind of vicariously.
We were like accountability buddies, maybe,
Yes.
making sure I showed up to the run really was Suzanne's job.
That was the hardest part. You got to Seattle. But yes, our husbands still get to hang out, I feel like, on a monthly basis due to like work stuff and all kinds of things. But we have not seen each other in ages. So I'm extra thrilled to have this chance to reconnect and catch up.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about what you're doing, the amazing things you're doing, but we'd love to go back a bit to do some Dmitria 101. If you could tell our listeners where your career started and how parenting and life has impacted the decisions you've made since.
Yeah, totally. I laugh about it all the time because when I think back, to when Suzanne and her husband met me, I was like a totally different person, as we all are. But I kind of laugh about that person and, like how little she knew, how little she really knew. But I was really focused on my career. I grew up, my mom's an immigrant from Korea, and our family was lower middle class, I would say. We didn't have a lot of money. And I was raised with the ethos that you can work hard and sort of make anything of yourself. And because we didn't have a lot from a very young age, my goal was to work hard to, create a better life for myself and whatever my children were in the future. And I sort of dove into that 100% from a really young age and excelled, right? Like I put my mind to it and I did it. And so the way that I built my everyday life, my patterns, my habits was to just be like type A, workaholic, super aggressive in wanting to climb the career ladder and be the best at everything that I could be good at, not necessarily because it was something that I loved to do or I was passionate about or was changing the world, but because I really was operating from this survival mechanism of, wanting to ensure that I had enough money to put a roof over my head and to feed myself and my children and, all the things. And so I happened to end up in advertising. I know Suzanne can relate to the field.
Yes.
I got in really early in the data and analytics space and really thrived. And I spent about 16 or 17 years doing digital advertising and really hit the sort of peak of my career there and realized I didn't want that next job. Right. Like Suzanne, you shared this story about like, you don't want the VP role.
Yes.
And I
Right.
realized I didn't want that next role that was there for me. It was outside of the current organization I was in.
Mhm.
It just like I looked at it and I was like, oh, that just
It's
sounds
not for me.
not for me.
Ugh.
And my current job wasn't really conducive to the life that I wanted to lead at that point. I had not young children, but they were, still at home.
Right.
And I was traveling quite a bit. And so sort of the universe collided and I ended up making a move over to Nike. And I thought, oh, this will be great. I won't travel. It's right here in
Mhm.
Portland. It's an amazing brand. It will be a complimentary experience to the one that I've just had and really
Yeah.
excelled at. And I took that leap and, it wasn't what I thought it would be.
Mm.
I had the freedom in my job to make my own schedule. I mean, that schedule was like overworking constantly with zero boundaries, but I still
They
had the
love when
freedom.
you make your own schedule, when you make it longer than they would have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got there and the reality was I had to be sitting at my desk or on campus for, 12 hours a day. And so I just never saw my kids ever.
Mm.
And I realized I was running probably more likely from one meeting in one building to another meeting in another building. And I just like it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was, oh my God, I could put all my energy into this and I can be really successful here and, sort of like have everything that I dreamed of as a little girl. But the cost of that. It was the first moment where the true cost of that, of
Hmm.
chasing that part of the dream hit me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't see my husband, I don't see my children at all.
Mhm.
And if I continue to do this, I'm going to lose them. It's not sustainable. It wasn't an environment that was going to allow me to have both.
Right.
And I sat with that for like a millisecond. And I think I like literally stopped on the sidewalk in campus and I was like, oh, that's big. And then I just like
Mhm.
took off running to my meeting because I was late. I was
It's
like,
big, and I will
okay,
think about it again later.
Yeah, I'll think about
like
that at
maybe some
lunch.
other day I'll think about this, but like
Mhm.
I'm too busy, to think about it. And that was sort
Yes.
of the ethos of my life. I was too busy to like deal with anything or think about anything. And
I think there's so many people out there that can relate exactly to that. Like, I'm too busy to think about what I should be doing with my
Yeah.
life, which
yeah,
is that's painful to think. Yeah.
It
it
is.
is. It is. And like, I mean, I've unpacked the too busy a lot
Oh, yeah.
since then. Maybe I've unpacked it too much. But yeah, it's like, okay. So I had this moment where I had this just like really a lot of clarity. And then I came back around to it because I was like, okay, I really do need to figure out what's going on here. Is there a path to balance for my particular situation here
Right.
or not? And just the situation for me at that moment was I need to get out. And I told my husband, and I hadn't been super happy there. And he knew that. And
Mhm.
so he was like, you should just quit. And I looked at him like, no, you just don't quit. Like, that's not how this works. You have to,
Yeah.
like, that's not how life is. And he was like,
Right.
why not?
Yeah, it is.
like,
Go for it. Yeah.
like I love when men or I mean my husband does this all the time. It's so simple. It's just so simple. You just you make the decision and then you just do it. And
Our
another
brains
one,
aren't like that.
right? Our
No.
brains are not like that. And I realized that, now later that I had this really strong internal belief that everything in life had to be hard, that you had to work hard,
Mhm.
that anything that came easy was not going to be good for you. You really had to like give a lot if it was going to be meaningful. And so this idea of just like
Wow.
quitting my job was, just
Yes.
out of left field, but I
Or
did it.
even
And
just doing a job that feels natural to your talents and your skills and your desires, like that has a
Right.
flow to it. I think a lot of
yeah,
people do think, well, it's not work because work is hard. Work is
work has to be hard.
effort.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
And a
Yeah.
little bit miserable.
Yes. Yes.
Or a lot.
Because yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like there has to be the exchange. And so to get the money or the type of money that you want to be making, I really have to be unhappy
Yeah,
because
of
being
course.
happy, why should they pay me for that?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh my
I
gosh.
And
used to
so,
actually say, like, if it was fun, they wouldn't pay us when I was at my corporate job and miserable. Be like, they pay
yeah,
us to be here because it's awful.
yeah, right.
I feel like the three of us came from the same pea pod, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting because your current role, which
hmm
talk about flow and
hmm
fitting your desires and your skills as a transformational yoga therapist and consciousness coach,
hmm
which we're going to get into what all that means
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
honestly, I don't quite know. I
Yeah.
need definitions. I need explanations. But we've
Yeah.
interviewed enough. You came from this world of data analytics, and it makes me think of a lot of the people that we've interviewed who've become coaches or therapists who have pivoted away from lawyers. How many lawyers have we interviewed, Misty? Like
Oh,
former lawyers,
I
I
mean,
mean.
at least once a week, I feel like we talk to a reformed lawyer.
But I gotta feel like you went through that same, probably the mental process that a lot of them have shared with us, and maybe external feedback that you've gotten from other people. With them, it's like, oh, you spent all this time getting this law degree, or you spent all this time, or you've been doing this for 15 years. You're so good at it.
Mhm.
Did you get any pushback, or was your own brain the only thing doing the pushback?
Well, I think the way I sold it to myself and probably to everybody else was that I was retiring. Right. So I was like,
Oh,
I'm done working. I put in the hard work and I'm just going to be a stay at home wife. I'm going to be the best mom. And I really believed that. Right. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not pivoting to anything. I'm just pivoting to like being a lady that lunches. I was so happy. I was so happy to live that life. I didn't even know what that meant. It was like so foreign to me. Right. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
going to work out. I'm going to like make my kids lunch. I mean, like that idea of making my kids lunch blew my mind to have the time and
yes,
to be home, right? Like those just like really idealized ways of being a mom were really
Yeah.
appealing to me. And I was like, this is my opportunity. I had a lot of self judgment around being a bad mom or not a bad mom, but an absent mom, right? Like I spent so much of
Oh.
my time focused on my career and getting ahead and traveling, and the
Mhm.
kids were with nannies or traded off between my husband and I as we were like
Mhm.
5 minutes in the house between flights. So I just had a lot of judgment and guilt about that. And I was like, now's my opportunity. I'm going to be the best mom ever. And so I quit my job and I quit in July. And so that fall I was like, here's my chance, you know,
Back to
and
school. I'm gonna
back to
shine.
school. I'm going to be like, all the
Gonna
things.
be that
And
mom.
yeah. And I remember so vividly, it was our oldest 18th birthday, and his birthday's in November. So you kind of get a sense of the timeline. And I decided that morning I was going to like go get him a bunch of balloons. And I got him, those big Mylar balloons at
Mhm.
18 and like a huge thing. And I'm so excited. I get it in the car, I get to school, and I walk in, and the front desk person at the high school was like,
You can't
"What are
have
you
them.
doing here?" I was like, "Oh, I'm dropping balloons off for my son. It's his 18th birthday." And she was like, "You can't be here."
You
Like
can't
just
do that.
so cold. And like, I was like, "Why not? Can I leave the balloon?" She's like, "Balloons are not allowed." And I was like, "Oh, I'll
Oh.
just like put him on his car." And she's like, "Ma'am, you can't do that." And I was just like totally deflated. So I'm texting my son, I'm like, "Hey, I brought you balloons." He's like, "Please go home and just don't feel bad." Like all this idea of being a mom that I had like made up in my head. And then the
Right.
reality was that my kids were like, seriously, he was a senior in high school. Like, he was like,
Yeah,
"What are
he's
you
a teenage
doing
Yes.
boy
here?"
going,
Right.
"Please
Like,
return to where you belong, not where I
yes,
belong."
which is not at school with me at
Right.
18. And, I just, it was another big moment for me of, oh, I traded the big title and like having that as my identity and way of feeling my own sense of self to attaching it to my kids. And I
Mhm.
realized in that moment what I had done, that I really still didn't know who I was. And that like identifying as just like the best mom in the world was actually covering something else that was missing. And that's what kind of threw me into the tailspin of like, oh my God, who am I? What am I going to do with my life? And that
Yes.
was sort of the hardest
Yes.
moment, was having
Well,
to ask those questions.
and a lot of moms, it
Yeah.
takes the full 18 years. It only took you those 6 months to to have
Right.
that
Well,
realization.
You're a
I was
fast
too
processor.
busy. I was too busy the rest of the 18 years, right? Like I had
Yes.
not been willing to ask those questions because I had filled my life with work.
Oh,
Yeah. And it sounds like in talking to you, this all came easily. Like I figured this out and then I figured this out. But in your book, Return to the Light
Yep.
Within, which Suzanne
Yep.
has behind her,
doot, doot.
Yeah.
you've been really open about having struggles with anxiety. So
Mhm.
was that something that it was part of your life prior to making these decisions? Did it really come to a head when you were trying to figure out who you were and realizing you didn't
Mhm.
know? How did that present itself?
Yeah. I think when I really look, I probably have had anxiety since I was a child
Mm.
and just didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what it was. It's not like we were having those conversations in our house at home.
Yeah.
My parents were always working. So, but throughout my career, I would definitely feel anxiety. And for me, anxiety is like getting caught in overthinking, over planning, trying
Mm.
to like perfect everything or control everything so that I knew exactly how it would go or I could accommodate any variable that would happen. Right. So, like, if
Yep.
somebody was coming, if we were having people over for dinner, I'd try and think of like every scenario of anything they might want to make their night enjoyable. And then I would try and make sure I had all of that
So
available to
exhausting.
people. It's so exhausting and it's not possible. Like,
Yes.
you can't accommodate every single whim or
No.
request in life. And it's also not
No.
expected. Right. And
No.
and that's what I didn't understand. Somewhere in my mind, I thought that if I could think of every scenario that I could solve this feeling that I had inside of me. And before I left the digital advertising world, I had gotten to a point where I would not leave the house and I would just sit in my office and like spin. And it just was
Mm.
like overwhelming. And I just like was paralyzed.
Mm.
And I knew at that point that it had gotten really bad. But I had been through the path of, I was on anti-anxiety slash antidepressants, right? Because it's a lot of times the same medication
Mhm.
Yeah.
for 10, 12 years. And I was starting to wean myself off of it at that point because I was like, I'm taking medication and it's actually getting worse. It's not
Mm.
getting better, but
Mm.
I hadn't realized that. And so, yeah, it was sort of this digging into who I am and what do I stand for and where does my self-worth come from that shifted all of the anxiety for
Mhm.
me.
I'm so excited for you as this path and where it's brought you and what you've learned about. And now you are taking what you've learned and helping clients with
Yeah.
primarily one-on-one sessions, correct? Or do you do anything with groups?
I do like sometimes I do workshops with groups. I teach at a local yoga studio here, but my primary format is one to one. I just think people feel really able to be vulnerable and to share and work on your specific version of what anxiety, what trauma looks like for you, and get into how we can work with the inner workings of the body, like
Mm.
your neural pathways and your biochemistry and how we can work with how it presents for you specifically because everybody has their own unique sort of patterning, right? Like I
Yep.
shared mine is that I grew up in this sort of interesting household that was not really wealthy. We didn't have a lot. I had this sort of component of the American dream and being able to work yourself out of that poverty and it programmed my brain and my nervous system to operate in a certain way. And I applied that the rest of my life.
Mm.
Right. And so
Right.
knowing that and then being able to shift that template, if you will, is what allowed me to get out of it.
Now, I need to
Ooh.
know. about? Because
I need to
I,
know
I
so
enjoy
many.
all, I know you
Yeah.
to know so many things. Let's start 10 years ago. No.
Yeah.
Okay. So transformational yoga.
Mhm.
Tell me, I'm so interested about this.
Yeah.
I've heard
Yes.
of like I know of hot yoga and like hatha yoga and
Mhm.
like there's some different varieties. So now
Yeah.
what does the transformational part pull into all that?
Yeah. So transformational yoga therapy is basically taking the whole of what yoga is and applying it to specific needs or challenges that you have in your life. So it spans from sort of mental health, which is where my focus is mental health, trauma, anxiety, to helping people with cancer, right? Like the field is pretty broad, but the idea of behind it and the way that it works is that we go in and help with a specific ailment and help
Wow.
bring balance into the life. And another major component is that it's paired with the medical side of it. So we're looking at not just yoga, right? Like the ancient teachings and what they knew, but with current science that's backing up why doing this particular thing is helpful and what is it actually changing in your nervous system? What is it changing in your blood chemistry? And what is it changing in like your endocrine system or your lymphatic system, right? Like, how are we using really specific movement or breath work to affect those things? So it has a full layer of science underneath it, which, for me and coming from data and I'm an engineer by
Right.
education, just makes me so like, I get giddy because I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, there's this thing that really works for me. And there's like real science that's behind it. And
Yes.
that merging for me, like it just lights up both sides of my brain. So that's
Yes.
Yeah.
that's what it is.
What is the process timeline like? Is this something that people start and they work on for years and years? Do you do it for 10 weeks over the internet? Like, how does it?
Mhm.
I want nuts and bolts. I'm
You
taking
want
the
nuts
role
and
of
bolts?
Yeah,
Suzanne
Yeah.
you're
today.
my. Ooh, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
the brain stuff, and you do the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do all of my work online over Zoom because we're coming out of the pandemic and it makes it
Yeah.
accessible for people. Other yoga therapists will do, in person work. That might come for me later. We'll see. And they're usually weekly sessions. So you start out with sort of a longer intake session. We talk about all the parts of your life, what's going on for you. And then we follow up weekly. And sometimes you move to every other week as you are able to build some of these things into your life.
Right.
And it depends on the sort of situation and the person. So 6 weeks is probably the minimum time period. But then I have clients that I've worked with for, a year. And it's sort of just part of their maintenance, right? Their mental
Right.
health maintenance.
So is that like 6 weeks they work with you and then they learn the core things that they continue to do in their
Yeah.
day-to-day life? Okay.
Yeah. Mhm. Exactly. Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah.
And
And really
the reality,
transforming that brain part of it, like the neural pathways, like it has to become part of you.
yeah. Yeah. And the reality is that as we're working, you're changing. So what I
Mm.
would do with you week 1 is going to be totally different than week 6 and very different than week 12 or week 50. Right. And so it kind of, I mean, it obviously depends on the client, what they're interested in.
Right.
But for me, I'm constantly learning, right? I'm always like, there's always a level deeper to go. There's always more to learn about myself. There's always more aha moment. They
Mhm.
happen for me almost weekly, which is surprising at this point. I'm like, oh, there's more.
I love that. I love it.
Right? Yeah.
So now if you were watching one of these sessions just to the naked eye, does it
Yeah.
look like yoga or how is it different?
Yeah. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So I would say it looks like almost a talk therapy session for
Okay.
part of it. So there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of understanding what's going on. And then half of it or so, depending on the session, is going to be traditional yoga, which may be what you know about yoga and it may be something different. So,
Yeah.
sort of westernized yoga is movement.
Mhm.
And so I think when people think of yoga, you think of Western studio class.
Yes.
That's what I thought of it, right? You think of hot yoga, power yoga, but yoga has a lot a lot more to it, right? Breathing is a really big part of it. So, breath work is so sort of popular right now.
Yeah.
But it's part of the yogic tradition. And a lot of the breath work that's being taught actually comes from yoga. It's just not in the Western world connected.
Mhm.
And so we'll do breath work, we'll do sort of mindfulness. There's a whole gamut of practices in yoga that we'll tap into. So there's definitely movement because it's so important. And also, I like the movement because I think of it as the Trojan horse because you can move, like we all know to exercise when we're not feeling mentally well. But what we don't know is all the ways that it's changing our nervous system and biochemistry. And
Mhm.
so, even
Mhm.
if you're not like mentally able to get there, you usually can force yourself to do a couple of poses and then we can reset the nervous system and then go from there. So, it's this like beautiful Trojan horse to get in and change
Yes.
things without having to think about it so much.
Ugh,
I mean,
I know. And
I'm
I
all
might
in.
why I'm like super, super excited about this right now is my son was diagnosed with scoliosis a few
Mm.
weeks ago. And so he's going to be wearing a full brace for like till high school, maybe till high school graduation. So, but part of also the work is going to be doing the Schroth therapy, which something that I had never heard of until a couple of weeks ago. But now we're buying an entire like Swedish wooden bar set to put up in our workout room for him to be able to do therapy. And so much of it is just holding one position and then breathing into a particular section of your rib cage.
Mhm.
Which
Yeah.
Missy, does this go against all of my woo-ness? But I was like, okay, lady, you're gonna have my son breathe into his like lower vertebrae, whatever. But I mean, just seeing the science of it and seeing the physicality of it and how everything kind of plays off each other and how it just impacts every part of your body. I'm being much more sold on this. I'm being more open-minded to things.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, just the breath work part of it and how it can impact so many different parts of your body. So yeah, I think it's fascinating, the physicality and
Too.
the
I
mental
think it's
aspect of it.
really lovely. Like, sorry, I just totally spoke over you. I'm just excited. I am sorry, so sorry. But I love the undoing of that. Like you were saying, that you've always been like, it has to hurt, it has to be
Mhm.
hard, it has to
Mhm.
be. And Demetria said earlier that she thought life should be hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. There's really subtle things. And I think culturally, maybe we're starting to come around to this a little bit.
Mhm.
And maybe the
Mhm.
pandemic had something to do with that when we all slowed down.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's really beautiful to think that we can make change without hammering it into
Mhm.
ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think what's fascinating for me personally in my journey is that when I make big progress is when I'm doing something that feels good for myself on in my
Mhm.
body or it feels good to me and then I'm like, "Oh, this is possible." Right? Like I didn't know
Mhm.
this was possible. Now I know it's possible and I can go explore this thing that actually feels really good. And then when you're
Mhm.
Wow.
going and being curious and you're exploring that thing, then, new things open in your life that you didn't
Mhm.
know you were going to get into.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We want
Brain
to
stuff,
talk,
Missy, brain
it's
stuff.
brain stuff, and it's a
Yeah.
perfect lead into, we want to talk
Yeah.
about the consciousness coaching piece of it.
Mhm.
It I'm assuming they go together, but is it something
They
you
do.
do separately, or does it always go yoga, consciousness? It's two different things.
They're both the same exact thing and two totally different things, if
I
that's
love
not
that it's
confusing
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. So some people love to get into the work through yoga and don't necessarily want to talk about like woo-woo stuff, don't want to have those conversations, aren't really prepared for it. So yoga is a great option if you are, like you actually just have a problem. Like I'm dealing with anxiety and I want some help with that. Like
Mhm.
yoga's the way to go. That
Mhm.
yoga therapy is going to help you and get you to a place of balance. The consciousness coaching, maybe you're like, I don't want to do yoga. I just want to explore more about myself and what else is out there beyond what I'm currently aware of. And so I have people that do just one or the other. And oftentimes they just sort of like end up merging down the road.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, but the consciousness coaching is really about exploring what's possible for yourself. Like, what else is possible? I think so often we are set in like, this is reality, this is my truth. I know I was. And then you might hit a moment in life where you're like, oh, wait, something that I was so sure is true is not true. Like, it might be fact to you. And then you realize it's not. And what does that mean if,
Mhm.
right? Like, Suzanne, if you're like, oh my gosh, actually, like this breathing thing does do something
Yeah.
really important, and you had some really strong belief about it before, that might be like a moment for you where you're like, wait, what else do I think is true?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
maybe there's more to the story here.
Yeah.
And so that coaching is really helping people explore that. Like, what else is possible? What else could be true? Where are the places in my life where I'm holding on really strong to my beliefs rather than like holding them in our hands? Right.
Mhm.
So if you're on the audio only version of this, like holding on tight, your fists are like gripping to things, gripping to your beliefs. And how do we just like open up our hands and hold our belief, but also allow for more? How do we like
Mm.
see what's around that belief? How do we explore what's around that belief and allows sort of new, different information to come in and assess what that means for you?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
love that visual of it.
I do. Like,
Yeah.
I actually felt my hands relax. You
Mhm.
know,
Oh,
Right? You're like, oh,
we are like this a lot. I'm like this a lot.
I
yeah.
know.
Just
Well, especially
clenched.
even with the breathing, I didn't realize like I was almost hyperventilating because I go to the breathwork classes and the physical therapy stuff that my son's going through. And just as a mom, I have you ever noticed that like how much you hold your breath or you like
Yep.
you're doing the same movements as them if you're watching them on the court or if you're watching them
Yeah.
do something. And so I would do kind of the same things. And it's like, I don't think my body's ever had this much like pure oxygen in it in 1 hour. And it's so, I mean, there's just that
Yeah.
piece of it. But yeah, it has got me thinking like, okay, if it can realign a spine, like what else can it do? So
Mhm. Yeah. Well,
Pretty
I love that you
powerful
talk about
stuff.
hyperventilating because one of the moments I had, and I've talked about it in some other interviews, but I used to run all over campus at Nike. It's a big campus, and you have your meetings just like literally everywhere. And I wasn't eating. I wasn't like, doing anything for myself, like to
mhm.
function. But
Mhm.
I started doing this thing where in between meetings, I would run up and down the stairs to get to different floors, not for fun. And
I was like,
I was
what?
like, more
no,
running?
more running, no. And I would find myself in a stairwell with nobody else in it. And I would like hide almost, and I would like tuck myself in a corner and I would just take a deep breath. And
Oh,
like, I would just spend a minute and take a deep breath. And at the time, I was just like, oh my God, my body just knew I needed like a minute to
Mhm.
pause and like literally do something for myself. And the only thing I could do for myself was take a breath, which is a sad scene when I look back on it, but it was my reality. And now, like having been through so much training around this, when we take a deep breath, and I'll talk about like what a deep breath is because it's different than what most of us think it is, we actually change the pH of our blood. So, in that millisecond of taking a deep breath, you shift the pH of your blood. And when you do that, your blood realizes that it's like your body realizes it's safe. Your blood knows that it is at the right pH and it releases the oxygen it's carrying from the blood into your cells. So you're breathing, but your blood, when you're hyperventilating or not breathing, your blood's holding on to it. Because, like, when you're starving, your body holds on to the fat, right? We all know this as women. We've all heard this. So your
yeah.
body holds on to the fat. So don't starve yourself, right? So that your body releases the fat. It's the same with our blood and oxygen. When we're not breathing properly, the blood holds on to the oxygen because it doesn't think it's going to get more, and it's trying to dole it out to your cells in the way that it thinks is best. But when you're breathing properly, it says like, okay. And so you get this rush of oxygen that's actually feeding your cells, and it will change how you feel completely in that second.
Oh,
I mean, that's
okay.
talk us through
I was
taking a
gonna
deep breath.
say,
Like,
I
let's
think we need to
do
talk about
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
So
take a
let's
deep
talk
breath.
about a deep breath. So, for me, when I heard like take a deep breath, I heard, like inhale, like take a deep
Yeah.
breath, take a lot of oxygen in. But what you're doing, and it's funny that you mentioned hyperventilating because like something like 60% of adults hyperventilate just all the time.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Not like in a moment. We just are constantly hyperventilating. And I was like,
That
oh,
can't be
okay.
okay for us.
It's not okay for us for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I was like, no, no, no. When my professor was teaching us, I was like, no, no, no. I don't hyperventilate. I don't breathe. Like I hold my breath a lot.
Mhm.
And he said to me, oh, no, when you're holding your breath, it's because you've been hyperventilating and you have so much extra oxygen. Your body is forcing you not to breathe because you're over oxygenated.
Oh my
So,
God.
like,
Interesting.
really blew my mind, right? Because I was like, there's no way I hyperventilate. And he was like, you like, number one sign, if you catch yourself holding your breath, you've been hyperventilating.
Because we've all caught
I
ourselves doing that, right?
I hold my
Mhm.
breath a lot.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the art of a deep breath, what you'll do is you will just first notice your breath. Like feel your breath come into your lungs, right? We don't normally think about this, but just taking one breath to inhale and exhale and just notice that.
Okay.
And then the next one you're going to count. And so you're going to inhale and count the number that it takes you. And you're going to exhale and you're going to really slow that very first part of the exhale. So, right when you change from inhaling to exhale, you're going to exhale, but it's going to be really, really like the slowest you can. And
Okay.
then you do that. And then about like halfway through your breath, you exhale the rest of it. So you're not trying to like exhale until it's uncomfortable. You are just trying to like let your breath out
Let it
slowly.
out.
Mhm. And what we're doing is we're extending the exhale. So you want your exhale to be longer than your inhale. And that causes your blood to have more carbon dioxide in it. And when it has the additional carbon dioxide, that's what changes that pH of your blood, which signals the body to release the oxygen. It's so counterintuitive. I don't know why the science works like that. So don't ask
So
me that.
amazing.
Okay.
But
I need
it is how it works.
we're getting close to the end, but I need to
I
add
know.
this because this is where I was starting to hyperventilate the other day because she was trying to explain how to belly breathe. Like,
Oh.
and I've heard this once before too, that if you're too much chest breathing, that your body almost thinks like it's like it's almost like a startle response, and
Mhm.
versus
Yeah.
the relaxing like into your diaphragm belly breathing.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
got to tell you, I mean, she tried all these tricks. She's like, put a stuffed animal on your chest and one in your tummy, and try to breathe so the
Mhm.
one on your tummy goes higher. And
Mhm.
both of us are like, no, we're a mess. So, so,
We're a
so
little
Yeah, it's
woozy.
super normal, Suzanne. Super normal. Like it will take us weeks when we get into breath work and yoga therapy. It can take us weeks to get into diaphragmatic breathing because it is not something most of us do,
yeah,
and we haven't built the muscles to support us doing it. So it takes a
Right.
lot of time. Like it's taken me probably 6 months to really be able to properly breathe.
interesting. Ooh, so okay,
So
when you say
like
muscles, you don't mean like muscle memory. You mean like literally like my ab
I,
muscles?
I
And
Like,
your
mean, yeah, like
diaphragm
your
doesn't know how to
diaphragm.
move.
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
And the
yeah, I know.
muscles surrounding it and supporting it aren't built up or used because as a
Yes.
society, we are taught that we don't emphasize that there's zero practice,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like we aren't taught how to do it. So unless you're really thoughtfully breathing properly and like build that into your muscle memory, it's really hard to like get yourself to breathe differently. So don't feel bad.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay,
Like
we need.
I'm so energized to figure it out.
I
It's
know, I know, and it's gonna be a
I
lot. It's probably gonna be like me trying to figure out my Enneagram type. I think it's gonna take a few months. It's gonna take little bits of aha
Yeah.
moments
yeah.
for a while, and I am glad that I'm being forced to actually kind of do this with him, and that I
Yeah.
think it's good for both of us. But
Mhm.
Could be
yeah,
life
I
changing.
mean, breathing, it literally is the number one thing in life, and I think a lot of us are doing it wrong. So,
Yeah.
oh,
Well, back to the consciousness coaching, right? Like when I think about, when I first introduce it, people are like, "Oh, it's really woo woo and out there," and I'm like, yes and no, because we're unconsciously breathing, but you can move that into conscious breathing and
Mhm.
completely shift so much in your life, right? So it's not necessarily, I mean, I do get into like pretty out there things with people. Like, yeah, I definitely am like on that end of the spectrum of woo. But but there is so much like right here in our bodies and in our lives that we interact with every day that we just are on autopilot for. And if you can just become more conscious of it, the way that it will shift your life is really incredible.
Yeah. And what was my word for the year, Missy? Intentional? I mean,
Yes.
intentional equals consciousness, pretty much.
Right. I just
Yeah,
really can't think of
100%.
anything more grounding. Like, forget the
Mhm.
woo-woo. Like, knowing your body and taking care of it and being aware of it is very grounding. And
Mhm.
Absolutely.
we aren't taught that at all.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We should have started with that because now we need a part 2 that's all of the, like, actually how to. Like, but
Yeah,
no, actually,
I'll come back and
Well,
do
we'll
it.
just have to do it again.
well, you know what? And y'all who want to know more about how to do it, how do people reach out to you to find out how to book a session with you or book 6 sessions with you to
Yeah.
learn how to do this?
For a year's worth. How about
Yes.
52?
Yeah. You can find me at my website. It's findingruminants.com. And also, I'll send you guys a link. I have a free workshop on yoga for anxiety that it's like an hour. It talks about the nervous system and how we interact with it. It's totally free and will give you a good basis for like what's actually going on in your body. So if that resonates with anybody, definitely log in and check out that content.
Yeah, we'll put that in our group and I'm going to do it.
Where's the best people or where's the best people? Where's the best place
Right
for
here.
people to find your book, Return the Light Within?
You can find it on Amazon. It's probably the easiest place.
Okay, we'll put links to that in the show notes. Do you have
Perfect.
another book in the works that I want to spend some more time talking about the book, but we'll have to save that for part 2.
Yeah. I have a second book out, which is more of a workbook on self-discovery.
Mhm.
And I know there's a third book, but I don't know when it's coming. It hasn't, you know,
Yeah.
we'll find out when it actually comes through. Who knows?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Missy and I say that a lot.
Yeah.
We're
Really
familiar.
late.
We're familiar with that.
Yeah.
All right. Terrific.
Right.
Well, guess is it time
I
for the
guess
Look,
it's
Listen,
time.
Learns?
Huh? Yeah, I
Mhm.
think it's
Right.
time. And if anyone's here for the first time, we're really glad you're here. And at the end of every episode, we do a look, listen, learn. And it is just something we might be reading, listening to, learning about ourselves, classes we're taking, whatever it is. Sometimes it's silly and sometimes it's amazing and life changing. And we do not like to put our guest in the hot seat. So, Suzanne, tell us what you're look, listening, learning.
All right. Well, mine is not life changing, at least not my look. We've been watching What We Do in the Shadows.
I love it.
Oh, have you watched it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I feel like it's one of those shows that I discovered, but it's like in season 4. So I don't
Story
know.
of my life.
I know. I'm like, oh, I'm so like on top of it. I'm at the cutting edge of,
I'm so behind in
Yeah.
it, but I do love it.
Oh my God. So for anybody who has not watched it, it is basically, it's kind of like The Office, but with vampires.
Totally.
And oh my gosh. And yeah, I had to like look up a quote to sum it up online. So the quote I found is look into the daily or rather nightly lives of 4 vampires who have lived together for over 100 years on Staten Island.
Of all places on Staten Island.
I know.
think it's so funny.
So funny. But my favorite one of them is an energy vampire, which is basically like he's just the most boring dude. Like he doesn't suck your blood. He just sucks your energy by being so boring. And then one of the
Like
guys,
that's relatable.
oh my God, it's I know, it's probably the most relatable. And one of the guys is kind of this non-vampire intern that's trying so hard to like be accepted by the vampires.
He
And
wants
for
to be a
mates.
vampire so
Oh,
badly.
so bad. But he basically just does the, schleps around and does their dirty work and stuff. Oh my God, it is so funny, especially because we're just coming off of Better Call Saul, marathon. And so after that, it's just so light and silly and just funny. Just funny.
And where do you find it? What
is
what
that?
streaming platform
I
do you
don't
find it?
know.
Is it Hulu?
Oh, shoot. You know what? Because we have Apple TV and just everything's just like in
Yes.
there.
okay.
And so
Yeah.
I
Which
never
is
know
kind
where
of
it
creepy.
comes from.
It's
I
like you've been
know.
watching this on this platform, and you watch this on
Yeah.
that platform.
I want to
Um,
say Hulu, and if it's
I
not
kind of think
Hulu,
Hulu.
I'll edit that part out. But we'll have it in the show notes. We'll have a link to it in the show notes.
Okay.
Let's see here. And I'm listening to Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, who wrote Station 11.
Mhm.
And I don't usually read too much about the books before I read them because I want to be kind of surprised and delighted along the way. But I think I'm so confused, I'm going to have to listen to it again. So I'm going to do y'all a favor and just let you know it is a novel of art, time, love, and a plague that takes the reader from Vancouver Island in 1912 to a dark colony of the moon 300 years later. It was that moon part that kind of confused me. So,
Yeah.
so I think audiobooks, again, I probably shouldn't do them when I'm driving and stuff. I think I miss some nuances along the way.
Mhm.
So maybe not
Or I miss a
everybody.
turn if I'm
Well,
really
and then I
listening.
listen
Yeah.
to it when I'm going to bed, and sometimes I think
Mhm.
I black out. I don't know.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah, so there's a moon involved and colonies on the moon. So if y'all are like, wait, how'd they get from Vancouver Island to the moon? It's apparently because it takes place 300 years later. So there's that, but it's very good. And it's good enough that I really want to get it and I'm going to listen to it again, maybe in 2 times speed this time. And I am learning about my Swedish wall bars, which are shipping today. So if anybody does not know what those are, they are, imagine like a really wide ladder that goes up to your ceiling basically. And then at the very top, there's like a hanging bar, and you can do all kinds of stuff with putting, what are those bands and
Uh-huh.
stuff around it for resistance. But primarily it's going to be used for hanging and stretching spines around here and helping some back problems. So um, I have found some videos where people they use them almost like stripper poles. Like you can do some really like
Oh.
exotic things, and you can do, what are the they called
Ooh.
silks or whatever, because there's
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
there's a
yes.
hanging bar
Yes.
that you can attach
Mhm.
from it, and you can do all kinds of silks and these gorgeous things. And I've been struggling with vertigo for the past 2 weeks. I'm like, just watching the videos, I was like, nope, I'm just gonna be upright.
It just makes you dizzy to think
Yeah.
about it.
But who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe I'll work my way up to doing something upside down and sexy on it. We'll see.
Then we're going to need to post some
You
pictures.
let us know. Yeah, you let us know about that.
I will. Or maybe I won't. What about you? What about you, Dmitria?
I have been watching, like, somehow I got on a kick of documentary type stuff on Netflix. So we watched the story of I don't even know, Mantia Teo.
I don't know.
So he's a football player, a college football player at
Oh,
Notre Dame, and
yeah.
he's kind of like the first big catfishing story.
That's
And it is
right.
wild.
Yeah.
It's like so wild, what is going on. And then we watched the Woodstock documentary over the last couple of days, and that too is kind of wild, but they both take place in, like, well, Woodstock was in 99. It was Woodstock 99. And
Oh, okay.
the football thing happened after that, but not a long time after. But it's this really interesting snapshot into our culture, society, where we were at that moment.
Mm.
And it was sort of shocking because, like, I was alive then, right? Like sometimes you're watching documentaries, you're like, I don't know what that was. Like I wasn't
Right.
alive then, whatever. It's interesting. But I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like this is the way that we were behaving. This was our attitude towards women then. And like I felt that, and oh, it's actually changed so much. So these two documentaries just give such a great snapshot into where we were. And I
Mm.
think for me, gave me a lot of insight into how far we've come across a
Oh,
lot
that's
of
encouraging.
social aspects of our existence.
Mhm.
And how, like still there's this stuff that is pervasive, but definitely not to the degree it was, 20 years ago, which we don't often stop to think about. So those were two really interesting sort of moments
Oh,
in
Yeah.
terms of what I'm watching.
I could use a little of that living here in Texas. I need to
Yeah.
I need to know we're making progress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely sliding in some areas, clearly, but
Mhm.
like the sort of like the the Woodstock 99 documentary really highlights bro culture and like the
Mhm.
sexual assaults that happened there and why they were happening and how the women were treated. And it's just
Yeah.
super interesting because it's like that was a moment. It was a 3-day weekend, but it was really just how women were treated in general then.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hope
Yeah.
that we're not still in that place. Doesn't feel
Right.
like it to me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
I hope we're
interesting.
raising
Okay,
our
putting them on the
boys
list.
better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And well, you're probably learning stuff all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm like I on the Enneagram side of things, I definitely have the investigator is like one of my primary things.
Oh, now
And
which one is
so
that? What number are you?
I think
5.
it's 5
Okay,
maybe.
5.
I'm a 5-1 and like 6 or something. Like I have multiple that are right up there and then like everything else is pretty low.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm the investigator. And so for me, I like get on a topic and I'm just like diving deep. So I'm constantly looking at what the latest research is around yoga and like literally anything. like what did they learn out of that study, and they're all like NIH sponsored studies, which I think is really interesting that the government is investing in
Yeah.
studying yoga. So yeah, I'm constantly digging through like science, which
Interesting.
is sadly really exciting for me.
That's not sad. I think it's fascinating.
No, I mean that you're just think of all the people that you're helping because you're distilling that down to what they need to know
Right.
and impacting their lives.
I'm trying to distill it down. Sometimes I
Yes.
get too caught up in all of the science.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You look alert. I cannot talk today, Missy. Too much
I've had a
chamomile
hard time
tea.
today too. I don't know what it means.
Oh, are you listen, learning anything else?
Is it my turn?
Oh, I was asking
I don't
Dmitria,
know.
but
Oh,
You're gonna have to do some serious editing.
that's
or
okay.
not. These are my favorite parts of the podcast when you like don't edit this stuff out. So I say leave it in if I have a vote.
There you
But
go.
I mean, listening, I have been obsessed with Dua Lipa for a
Oh.
while, and she doesn't have any. I don't think she has a new album out or anything. But I love her music. It feels very to me. She represents the powerful woman that is not like overbearing, and she wears very little clothing and does it in a way that feels like she feels good about it, not that like the industry has made her or like society is, putting her
Yeah.
into some box.
Yeah.
And so it feels really like grounded power, feminine power. And so I just love that. And I feel like it comes through her music. So anytime I'm like driving in the car, I always have like a little Dua Lipa on.
Now I'm in the mood to.
I know. I'm gonna go
Might be
do
what
some
I-
downloading.
Uh-huh.
Do it.
That might be what I listen to while I get my stuff done this afternoon.
I know.
Try it. It'll feel good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh shoot.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a few more minutes for Missy's
Yeah.
Look, Listen, Learns?
Yeah.
Or we can let you go and talk
I want to
amongst
hear all
ourselves.
about it.
All right.
I'll try to talk.
Missy,
faster
what do you
than I
look,
normally
listen,
do.
learning?
So I just listened to Flying Solo by Linda Holmes, and I'm pretty sure that one of my Look, Listen, Learns a long time ago was Evie Drake Starts Over, or Evie Drake Starts Over. Was her first book, and loved it. Still in the same setting. It's set in Maine, which is one of my favorite places on the
Oh,
planet, and
yes.
it's great. It's a great book for in between when I do my creepy, twisty thrillers.
Now, are you like
Loved it, loved
me and Maine's your favorite place on the planet and you haven't actually been there, or have you been there?
I've been there.
Okay. Because it's one of my
I've
favorite
been
places and
there,
I've never been there. I'm
and
assuming.
yeah, I almost did not come home with my family. Like, this is where I'm meant to be. Now, I haven't ever been through a Maine winter, so
yeah,
probably gonna have to reserve deciding if it's truly my favorite place.
get your
But
summer
I'm
house
so
there.
hot all the time. It sounds great to me. Like,
Yes.
just surround me with snow. Sounds fantastic.
But okay, you said these are kind of creepy?
No, they're not. It's
They're
a good
not?
break from my
Oh, it's a
creepy. So
break
like
from your creepy, okay.
say I listen to a thriller and then I try to listen to something lighter, and do the same with my books, try to read something where I learn something and then read something a little lighter. So this is a great, easy listen. So sweet. I love the narrator. I will look up who had narrated it, put in the show notes, because I really love her voice. So that is what I just listened to. And then I just started reading Bookends by Zibby Owens.
Yay.
So she
Former
was a
guest.
guest a while back. I can't remember when that was. We'll put the episode in the show notes, but I just started it. I haven't gotten very far, but I love what I've read so far. So I recommend that. And I'm not really learning anything this week, but something did happen to me that I'm like, I need to lock that down and remember. So when I get kind of in the weeds and I'm stressed and I'm busy, and I think my hormones have been a complete disaster ever since having surgery in May. Like I've just been out of whack, not quite myself. And when I get like that, I forget to check in with my people. And I don't even think about it. The idea of making a phone call is sometimes just too much.
Yeah.
And so my brother actually reached out this week and called me, which is weird. So at first I was like, who's dead?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I
We
know.
text a lot, but not phone call a lot.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when I was like, hello. But he was just calling to check in. And afterwards I thanked him and I told him, like, I didn't know I needed that, but I've been in this phase of just not reaching out to my people. And I realized how long I've gone between conversations with some people that I talk to on a more regular basis. So I have to remember that even when we don't feel like it, that's probably the most important time to do a check-in. And it doesn't have to be anything serious, but just talking to the people in your life who know you best is good for you.
That's a really, really good one. Okay.
So that's it. That's what I got.
When I come back, I'll tell you why that's good for your brain.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna do
Or I
part
can
two.
tell you right
definitely-
now. I can tell you later.
Well, you definitely have to come back. We need a part
Yeah.
2 because I feel like
Yeah.
we only did the very surface of what it is that you do.
We'll
We
have
need
you
to go
back when we
deeper.
think we're breathing right, and you can tell us.
We'll just do a
Right.
whole episode of us breathing. People will love
Love
that.
it.
We did do that workout episode. We did a Facebook Live episode of us working out in our closets.
Yeah.
I still do the push-ups against my wall. I love
Did
them.
you?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the only way I can do a push-up.
It's dangerous because the door slides. But now I won't need the ball because I'm going to have my Swedish wall bars. You're going to see
You'll love
way
them.
too many pictures of those. Oh, do you have some?
No, they used to be at the I used to go to bar
Uh-huh.
and we had them there, and yeah, you can just when you're hanging, I mean, you've experienced it, but you just feel your spine like just there's so much space created. It
Oh,
feels so good.
it's so good.
Yeah, it just stretches everything. And then there's
Mhm.
other things where you lean back. Oh, that just felt
yeah.
good just doing it in my chair.
Yeah.
Let's do a chair workout episode.
Get fit while you sit.
Yes.
Love
oh
it.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have kept you past your time. Thank you
Yes.
so much for being with us today. So excited for the next time we have you on to
Yeah.
follow up with all the other exciting things.
Well, thank you for having me. So fun as always chatting with you.
You too. All right. Well, I'm so excited to do some of these look, listen, learns. And yeah, we'll talk to y'all next week.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us for the Mom and podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show today. And if you know someone else who could benefit from today's episode, be sure to share it with them. Also, please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find links to all the things we discussed today in the show notes over at our website, momandpodcast.com, with the AND spelled out. In between shows, you can find us at the socials, including our private Mom and Community Facebook group. You can find links to the group, all of our socials, and our questions and comments section over at our website, momandpodcast.com. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you so much. Now go out there and make your ellipses count.